Hello everyone, I'm Nabil Murad. In this project, we learn one of the very important tasks we perform repetitively in Excel. I have a date column, a region, sales rep, customer, cost of goods sold, and sales. And then I would like to extract the records based on a condition in the region and a condition in the name of the sales rep. I wrote my conditions in cell K2 and cell L2. Right now, I have Midwest and John. And when I change my conditions, I want the records to be extracted automatically in the range starting from column N to column S. So here are the records for John in the Midwest region. If I change the name of the sales rep by selecting a different name, let it be Nabil, automatically the records corresponding to Nabil in the Midwest have been extracted. If I select a different region, let's say the North region, automatically the records corresponding to this region have been extracted. Extracting records is extremely important in Excel. And what I did in this example is that I created a group of functions that enable me to extract the records dynamically from a source list. And this is what I'm going to explain in this tutorial. But before I start my tutorial, I want to show you that I created it in different ways as well. I created it by creating a code in the Visual Basic, and I used the loop over instructions, so I'm repeating the same instructions line by line in order to extract all the records. I'm not covering VBA in this tutorial, but I'm going to show you the code anyway. I also created it in VBA using an advanced filter. That's a very simple code. And I attached it to an event, so whenever I change the name, I don't have to trigger the code manually. It is triggered automatically because it's attached to the change event of this specific cell. So when I make any change in any one of these two cells, the code is triggered and it extracts all the records meeting the two conditions. We need to learn in this project how to extract dynamically by changing conditions, and we'll be doing this by using a bunch of functions. We have a lot to learn, so let's get started. This is the same exact setup, but I started by creating 3 helper columns, and I want to explain the concept. Well, I do have a region column and I do have a sales rep column. And I have my conditions in cell K2 and cell L2. These conditions have the data validation list functionality, so I can select at any time a different region. So when condition 1 is met in the region column and condition 2 is met in the sales rep column, so in this case I would like to extract the record. So let's understand the logic first. Because I have a conditional statement, I need to use one of the conditional functions. Which function am I going to use? We have the if function is a conditional function, the or is a conditional function, but the one I'm going to use here is an AND function. When both conditions are met, then I want to return a true, and when it returns a true, I want to be able to extract the record. Let's create an AND function, equal AND, and then I hit the tab key. Condition 1, if the region in this specific row is equal to the region coming from cell K2, and I can lock K2 by hitting the F4 key if I intend to copy down. And then I hit comma. Now the screen tip says this is logical test 2. My second logical test is in the name of the sales rep. Is it equal to the condition in cell L2? And I'm locking this one as well so that it enables me to copy it down. When the two conditions are met, then a true will be returned. Let's hit enter. The two conditions are not met, that's why I'm getting a false, but if I click and drag down, I can see some of the trues whenever the condition is met. Now if I look at the entire column, whenever you see a true, that means the region is northeast and the sales rep is Chin. My next step will be converting the trues and false. False means the conditions are not met. True means the condition is met. Well, I would like to convert them into ones and zeros, and I'll do that by adding the text above to the false or true. And that might stimulate Excel to convert the true and false to ones and zero. Let's see how we do this. If I type equal, and then I click on the cell above, and then I add a plus sign, and recreate the same exact test one more time. And then I open bracket. If this cell here is equal to cell K2, and I lock it, and then I hit comma, and then the condition in the sales rep, is it equal to the name of the sales rep in L2, and I lock it, and then I close the bracket, but to my surprise, the addition cannot accommodate adding text, so when I hit enter, I'm getting a value error. If I copy it down, I get a complete column of value error, and that doesn't work. So how can I solve the situation? My AND conditional function is able to accommodate and evaluate two conditions, but in order to use it for extraction, I need to convert it to ones and zero, and here the sum function will come for rescue. The sum function will exclude automatically any text. So if I type equal sum, and then I hit the tab key, what would you like to sum? I would like to sum the text, which is just an X in the cell above, and then I hit comma, and then create my conditional AND function. And the same exact function we created twice before, if the region in this row is equal to whatever region comes from cell K2, and I have to lock K2, and then I hit comma, my second condition is in the name of the sales rep, is it equal to the name of the sales rep coming from cell L2? Don't forget to lock because we are copying down, and then I need to close the bracket for the AND function and close the bracket for the sum function. Note that whatever the number of nested functions, the last bracket must be black in color, and it appears bold for a second before it turns regular. And then when I hit enter, what do I get? I get a 0. So I was able to convert the false into a 0. What if I drag down until I reach a true? So if I drag down until I reach a true, what do I get? Now I'm getting number 1. And I'm getting number 1 because the two conditions are met. And I'm getting number 1 because the sum function is adding this one to the 0 above. So what happens when I continue dragging down? When I continue dragging down, I keep getting 1 until the second occurrence of the two conditions appears. So if I want to scroll down a little bit until I find the second occurrence, let me double click and send it down. So it keeps repeating 1 because the false is equal to 0 and the 1 is coming by adding the cell above. So it keeps repeating number 1, and I'm very fine with that until we bump into the second occurrence. When we bump into a second occurrence like this one, this occurrence will be returning a true. True equals 1. If you add it to the one above, that is equal to 2. And then we continue getting 2 because the false is equal to 0 and the 2 is coming from the cell above until we bump into the next occurrence. The true equals 1 added to the 2 above, so it returns a 3. And that's wonderful. That's all what I need for extracting my record. All what I need in order to create a VLOOKUP function that looks at this column and it will extract number 1 and then it will extract number 2. But note, the VLOOKUP function is pre-programmed to take only the first occurrence. So even if I have multiple occurrences, it will pick up the first 1, it will pick up the first 2, the first 3, and so on. Let's see how we create this VLOOKUP function. Well, before I create the VLOOKUP function, I would like to find out how many records met my condition for northeast and chin. So to do this, I would like to find the maximum number in column C. That will be the number of records meeting my condition. It's a very simple max function, equal max, and then I hit tab. The max function is looking at this entire range starting from C2 downward. Shift Control down arrow to extend my range. Control backspace to jump back to my function. And then I close the bracket. When I hit enter, it tells me, well, we have 9 records where the region is northeast and the sales rep is Chin. I would like to test before creating my VLOOKUP function. So if I change the region, let's say to west, now I have 13 records for west and Chin. If I change the name of the sales rep and instead I'm selecting Sandra, then we have 6 records for Sandra in the west region. Now we are ready to create our VLOOKUP function. What does the VLOOKUP function do? The VLOOKUP function will search for a number in the leftmost column, and I want to extract 1, and then when I go down I want 2, and then 3, and so on. And when it finds the number, when it bumps into the first occurrence, only the first occurrence, it will extract a corresponding value from the second column, the third column, the fourth column, and so on. Let's see how we create our VLOOKUP function. Equal VLOOKUP, and then I hit Tab. The VLOOKUP function requires 4 arguments. What are the 4 arguments? First of all, the lookup value, which simply means what are you looking for? Well, I'm looking for number 1. So I type number 1. And note, whatever you type, whatever the lookup value, it should be in the leftmost column of a table called the table array. This is the table in which I'm searching. So I hit comma, and to select my table array, I select the top row, and then I extend my selection by hitting Shift Control down arrow, and note that this table array will be used in all my VLOOKUP functions, so I don't want it to change. And at the same time, I want to jump back to the top by hitting the F4 key. It locks the range and it takes me back to the function. And then I hit comma. This is the date. The cell in which I'm creating my function should be extracting the date, and the date in the table array is in column 2. That's the second column, the date. The third column is the region. The fourth column is the sales rep. So for this specific one, I need to extract from column 2. So I type 2, and then I hit comma. Are you looking at an exact match or an approximate match? I'm looking at an exact match, which is false, and then I select false by hitting the tab. I could type a 0 instead, and when I close the bracket, that would be enough to extract the date for the first occurrence of Sandra in the west region. When I hit enter, look at that. This is the date. Let me go down and check. When I go down, it's the 15th of April 2006, 15th of April 2006. After extracting the date with a VLOOKUP function, my next step is to extract an entire record. I'll be using the same exact VLOOKUP function, but for the region, I need to extract from column number 3. Remember, my table array starts from C. So the value that I want to extract for the date is from the second column, and then the region is the third, and then the sales rep is the fourth, and so on. So what I need to do is to replace the hard-coded number. Let me put my function in the edit mode by hitting F2. And this 2, which corresponds to the column index number, you know, when you click inside the function, you are revealing the screen tip. And if you click on the name of this argument, column index number, it will be highlighting the 2. Instead of hard-coding this number 2, I want when I drag my function to the right, it becomes 3, and then 4, and then 5. How can I do that? Let me hit escape, explain the concept outside, and then come back and edit this part of my function. What if I want to increment by dragging to the right? So I do this by using a columns function. I'll be using a columns function, and the columns function increments as you drag horizontally. Equal columns, and then I hit the tab key, and then when I select any 2 cells, like these 2 cells, U5 and V5, when I close the bracket, how many columns do we have in this range? When I hit enter, it says 2. But if I put my function in the edit mode and lock the first cell reference by hitting the F4 key, by locking the first cell reference, that means it becomes an absolute reference. So when I drag to the right, it doesn't change, while the second one is a relative cell reference, which means as I drag to the right, it will keep changing, and accordingly, it will return an incremental number. So when I drag to the right, look at this, it's returning an incremental number. What if we use the columns function inside our VLOOKUP function? Let's do that. I'm going to delete, and then I'll go to my function, the VLOOKUP function that I created in cell N2. I put it in the edit mode F2, and then I want to select the column index number instead of dragging, so I click inside the name of the function, click on column index number. We'll be replacing the hard-coded number 2 by a columns function that increments automatically as we drag to the right. So I say columns with an S, and then I hit the tab key, select any two cells. So I click and drag to select any two cells, and then I close the bracket for my columns function. I put the first reference in an absolute mode by hitting the F4 key. So when I hit the F4, I'm locking the first cell reference, and then when I hit enter, it's returning the same exact thing. Now what happens when I drag it to the right? If I drag it to the right, it's extracting the region. If I drag it further to the right, it's extracting the sales wrap. Let me put it in the edit mode in this cell one more time, because I want to show you what happens when you select a subset of a function. So if I put my blinking cursor in the VLOOKUP function and say column index number, I would like to understand what this part of my function will be returning. So if I hit F9, look at that, it says I'll be returning 4. Don't forget, I hit Control Z because I don't want to hard code number 4. I want to keep the dynamic columns function. Now we can continue dragging to bring the entire record. When you drag to the very right, note here for the numbers, it's returning a date. That's a matter of formatting. All what I need to do is to hover over this options tag, and when I click on it, I say fill without formatting, and that will bring back all the numbers. I was able with the VLOOKUP function to extract an entire record. But as I go down, I want the second occurrence of West and Sandra, and when I go further down, I need the third one. And to do this, I need to be able to change one of the arguments. So if you remember, if I put my function in the edit mode, this number 1 is the lookup value. It's a hard-coded number. In order to create a dynamic function, I want this number to increment as I go down. We learned that we can increment horizontally by using the columns function. How can I then increment when I copy vertically? I'll be using a pretty close function called the rows function. Let me show you what the rows function is doing. If I type equal rows, I hit the tab key, and then I say I want how many rows between W2, and then I hit shift colon to bring W2. From W2 to W2, that's only one single row. What if I lock the first reference? I put my function in the edit mode. Lock the first reference by hitting the F4. Now the first reference is locked. The second one is not locked. So when I drag down, I'm creating a list of incremental numbers in a vertical position. So I'm going to delete this function. I used it just to demonstrate, and I want to bring the rows function inside my VLOOKUP function. Let's put the function in the edit mode. What do you want to change? I want to change this one. I put my blinking cursor in the VLOOKUP function. Select the lookup value, and for the lookup value, I'm going to change it with the rows function. I type rows, and then I hit tab. So I'm selecting here in this case, because I want to return 1, I'm selecting one single cell, and I want the same cell one more time. So I hit shift colon to bring the same cell. Close the bracket for the rows function. From U1 to U1, that's one single row. But as I go down, I want to increment. So I put my blinking cursor in the first reference, hit the F4 key to lock the first reference, and that will do the job. When I hit enter, I'm getting the same exact thing. Now we can copy to the right one more time, because our functions in the adjacent column do not have the rows function. So I'm going to click and drag to copy to the right. Don't forget, click on the options tag and then fill without formatting. Now I can copy down. After copying down, I extracted all the records. My max function says you have 6 records. But when I go beyond the 6 records, I have a not available error, and I would like to fix this error. I don't want to see the not available error. There are so many ways of doing this, but I'm going to create an if function. My if function, it's a conditional function. If the number of records exceeds number 6, if the rows of going down is beyond 6, then in this case, I want nothing. Otherwise, I want my VLOOKUP function. So the VLOOKUP function is evaluating a condition. If the condition is met, then it will be doing something. If the condition is not met, then it will be doing something different. Let me create my if function, and I'll be nesting my VLOOKUP function inside the if function. To do this, I'm going to copy my function. So I copy it, and to make it easy for you to understand what I'm doing, I'm going to cut it, Control X to copy, and I start creating my if function from scratch. I delete everything, I hit escape and then hit delete, and I start creating my if function. Remember, I copied to the memory, I copied to the clipboard all my VLOOKUP function with its rows function and with its columns function, equal if. And then I hit tab. What's the function that increments as I go down? It's a rows function, if rows. And then I open bracket. If rows of any cell, let it be the same cell, U1, and then shift colon to add another U1. I close the bracket. I want to lock the first occurrence so that it increments as I go down. If rows U1 to U1, which right now is returning 1, and in the next row it will be returning 2, and then 3, and 4, and so on. If it goes beyond, if it's greater than whatever the max function is returning, don't forget we need to lock. If it's bigger than what the max function is returning, what do you want? That means I don't want anything, because I will get a not available error from the VLOOKUP function. So if it's bigger than the max, what do you want? I want nothing. Double quote means nothing in Excel. And then when I hit comma, look right now, the double quote, which is nothing, this is the value if true. If I hit comma, I'm in the value if false argument, which means if I'm still below 6 or equal to 6, what do you want to do? Well, I want my VLOOKUP function. I copied it to my clipboard. All what I'm going to do is Control V, and now I can close the bracket for the if function and then hit enter. I'm getting the same exact thing, no change. I can copy my function to the right as we did many times before. Don't forget, we need to fill without formatting from the options tag, and now if I click and drag to copy down, when I go beyond the 6 trackers, nothing appears. The if function works as a stopper, so the function doesn't work beyond the number returned by the max function. Now we need to test our project. So I'm going to change the region. I change the region from west, I'll make it north, and everything is dynamic. Now I have 8 trackers. To enjoy this project even more, I want to hide or minimize these 3 columns. I'm going to reduce the width of these 3 columns. I'll make them very small so that they don't bother me. If you wish to hide them completely, you can always do that. I'm going to narrow these columns. And now I want to enjoy my project. I'll be changing the name of the sales rep. Instead, I'll be selecting Nabil. For the North region and Nabil, we have 7 records. What about Nabil? In the Southeast region, we have 5 records only. What about another sales rep? Let it be Stephen. In the Southeast region, then we have 8 records. Everything is working fine. Everything is dynamic. You might wonder, well, I noticed here there is a change, there is a color fill that expands. This is conditional formatting. I'll be covering this conditional formatting rule. Is extremely simple. It simply says if the cell is blank, then I don't want anything. If the cell has contents, or if the cell is not blank, greater than, smaller than, double quote, then in this case, add the conditional formatting. We'll be covering the conditional formatting in another session, but here I want to show you that I created the same exact project by using a VBA code, and in this VBA code, just by changing the conditions, everything works dynamically. Let me show you that code. So I'm going to switch to my other finished file, and here I have the one created by filter. So if I click on the down arrow and I change, everything looks fine, everything is dynamic. So if I change to Nabil, I get the region, and I also created it by another different code, much more simple than the previous one. It's an advanced filter created in VBA, but in order to make it dynamic, you need to attach this code to the change event in these two cells. Just to give you an idea how the code looks like, so I'm going to switch to my Visual Basic editor. Well, this is the change event. If there is a change in cell H2 or a change in cell I2, then go ahead and trigger the code extract tracker. If I look at extract trackers, this is the one I created with looping. So I'm using a loop counter which repeats the same set instructions from row number 2 down to the last row. The last row is a variable. It's a data type variable that I defined at the beginning of my code. We are not covering VBA in this course, but just to give you an idea on what you could do in the Visual Basic. We learned a lot in this tutorial. One of the very important functionalities in Excel is extracting records outside a list. We know that we can find the records meeting two conditions by applying a filter, but the filter we apply in place is messing up the original source list. I'm not affecting the original source list. I'm extracting the records outside. I could print a report based upon these records. If you enjoyed this training video, like, comment, share and subscribe. Thank you for watching and see you in our next tutorial.